zetten we die aan. Die uit. En dan zetten we het totaaltje. Nou, als het goed is, moeten we live zijn. Heren, als mensen in de chat het even kunnen laten weten, dan of er goed geluid is en zo, dan weten wij ook dat alles werkt. But we're going to switch to English for this one.
Wow, that's good.
Good. Well, in front of us, let me switch to this one. In front of us are Guido Tent and Eelco Grimm from Grimm Audio. Many viewers will know you, I guess. Can I say world famous?
We don't need to be famous. Probably a lot of people know us.
Yeah.
Let's keep it like that.
Let's keep it that way. But yeah, you know, Grimm Audio is it's a brand from the Netherlands. You make studio stuff and you make consumer electronic stuff now.
Yes, we do.
But this interview is not only about Grimm Audio. It's also about you. Because what we wanted to sketch is who's behind the brand.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm mostly interested in. Of course, we're going to talk about Grimm Audio, your new products and your philosophy. But let's first start with...
the people.
Yeah, the people. So let's start with Eelco, maybe. Yeah?
Yeah. So
talk about yourself. Who is Eelco Grimm and where do you come from?
Where I come from? I think I've got audio painted all over me, and that started a long time ago. I think it already started when my brother played the most incredible prog rock LPs that inspired me from my tens. I think I was 8 or so that he played Rush and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and I really I was impressed by that. My parents also played music. There was a lot of music around in the house. My mother played piano. I also started playing piano when I was, I think, 8 or 9. My father played the recorders, and they both came from a musical family. Not professional, but music. Well, in a way, because my grandfather was a conductor for choirs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
In Indonesia, where my father was born.
Indonesia?
Yeah. So he was also head of the primary school in the city where they lived. Mm-hmm. But he was, apart from that, he was also the conductor of the children's choirs.
Oh, at least I learned something new now. I didn't know.
Yeah.
Cool.
So that I got that from my youngsters' days, and then my brother, at a certain moment, my younger brother, he started to play electric guitar.
Yeah.
And I had some interest in electronics from, I think, when I was 11, 12 years old. There was a magazine called Elector. I had a subscription to that, and I built stuff from it. And then I started to focus on audio electronics to cater for my younger brother's guitar stuff, and also for music, because I was so inspired by music. Mm-hmm. And then when I had to decide what to study, it looked logical that I went to Delft University to study electronic engineering. And actually that's when it really started, because a student friend of mine then introduced me to the magazine Audio and Technique.
Oh yeah.
That was very famous at the time. I'm talking 1984. Yeah. And when when Menno Spijker, as he's called, told me that this was a great magazine, he just handed me over to, I think, 2 years worth of magazines, and I read them all in one night. And I met
all of them.
Yes.
So how many are we talking?
I'm not sure. It was a lot, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop reading. And one of the authors that really was inspiring to me was Peter van Willenswaard.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he wrote for
He wrote
Audio
for
Techniek.
Audio and Techniek together
Okay.
with John van der Sluis.
Yeah.
And not soon after that, not long after that, I should say, I also met John. And John had a lot of interns. And I started also working for John as an intern. And that's actually where I met Guido.
But John van der Sluis, he is not active anymore, I
No,
guess.
unfortunately,
No.
he passed a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He
Yeah,
was
but
a
he
pretty
was
technical guy.
Yeah, and very influential. He was, I think, the one who introduced high-end audio into the Netherlands.
Yeah, probably.
And this magazine was extremely important for that. They focused not just on reviewing audio equipment, but also on the technology behind it. And they tried to do real good measurements.
Yeah.
They did reviews comparing equipment to each other, which was rare, certainly in those days.
Yeah.
And they tried to connect to the new underground scene, so to say.
Yeah.
Starting also in France with the magazine L'Audiophile, with Jean Iraga. That also had a similar approach of both reviewing equipment, developing own circuitry for do-it-yourself customers actually that could buy the PCBs that were developed there. And that's exactly what Peter and John did.
Yeah.
And that was so
Rebels.
inspiring. Yeah, rebels in a way, but
in a way.
it was all inspired by music and by the impact that electronics have on your experience of the music. And this was super inspiring for me. And tube electronics was a major part of that at the time. Because...
What year are we talking now?
1986, 87.
Yeah. So it's the starting days of maybe the transistor technology?
No, that was a long
before
standard.
that.
Yeah, tubes disappeared in mid-70s.
Mid-70s?
Yeah, sure.
Wow.
And it all went real fast. It's just like analog disappeared as soon as digital came to the...
it's way after the CD.
CD was just introduced.
83.
83. So it was the days of introduction of CD and perfect sound forever.
And they were still working with tubes.
Well, they were looking back at tubes.
Yeah.
Tubes were becoming... people were forgetting about tubes and the impact that it had. There were gradual improvements on some aspects, but other aspects got lost. And this is what this new movement realized, that there were aspects being lost on the way.
True.
And by using tubes, by using vinyl, you could get more of that emotional transfer of the original intent of the music.
Oh, we will get into analog versus digital, believe me, but
For sure.
let's see. But, so you come from a very musical background. Your father was even a conductor. You played the
not my
piano.
father, my grandfather.
Your grandfather was a conductor, and you
my father was a jet fighter pilot.
something completely different. But Guido, where did your musical journey start?
Yeah, a good question. I was born 67, and I was surrounded by technique and engineering stuff and magical components because my father worked at Philips, not in audio, but in television. He was working on picture tube quality.
That's a big division of Philips.
It used to be.
Was
yes.
a big division. Yeah.
And I think my first, the musical experience that really stuck in my head was playing Prokofiev, the Peter and the Wolf. On
For me too.
I had it on tape.
Well, my parents didn't play a lot of music, but they had I think about 20 or 30 vinyl discs in the house, and they had this famous Philips GA212 record player with the touch buttons, and that was a very good sounding record player, by the way. Anyway, that's my first experience with music that had an impact on me, and then that triggered something, and then I wanted to have my own equipment, and I think I was 8 around that time.
Okay.
So I wanted to be able to play music at my own room, and I assembled some kind of stereo with 2 different speakers. I didn't have any money, of course, by then, and I found an old record player which had a tube output stage, by the way, ECL82, in single-ended mono, and so on and so on. But I didn't play any musical instrument other than a piano that was in our house, because my youngest sister used to play piano, but I never got beyond Vader Jacob, I guess, like many.
Well, you
many
got
people.
good ears. That's
I
something.
I think I've been sufficiently surrounded by good sound, the record player, I think, someday died, so I had to find something different, new, and build it myself. And I think that was my first amplifier ever built,
Cool.
using germanium transistors that I found in my father's workshop.
Now, how old were you then?
I think I was 10 or 11.
And you built your own amplifier.
With a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, because
Okay.
those transistors literally died under your hands when soldering, and that's where I learned some of.
You still have nightmares?
No nightmares, but
you're grown over that.
it was a good lesson. And then I was 12, and I was in on primary school on group 8, and then we had this 1 week of camp at the end of the year, and of course you had what we called the Bonte Avond, where all the children performed whatever they wanted to perform, and that was in the 79. It was 79, where we had Bright Eyes from Art Garfunkel and ABBA, Does Your Mother Know, and all the music. And me and a fellow classmate, we arranged the equipment for that night with a very cheap Philips full range speakers. And I made a running lights, mechanically running lights, and that got me into the scene of disco.
So you were still very young then.
I was.
Yeah.
And then in secondary school, we kind of proceeded that, and that turned out to grow into a real drive-in discotheque.
Cool.
With some serious stuff.
DJ Guido.
Yes, I was a DJ. I DJ'd last summer as well, which was
You're still DJing?
Very nice experience.
Cool.
After 30 years, I did my last gig. I did one last summer. That's another story, but I think it actually emphasizes what drives me is the combination of music and engineering, and I think there's not a big difference when looking at Eelco in that aspect.
No.
Of course, running a drive-in discotheque is not really contributing positively to your school results. So my secondary school was a long run, but after that it was pretty clear that I went to study electronics in Eindhoven, and I just ran through that study in the nominal 4 years. And in that same period, when I did my internship at the Young Systems, distributor for audio innovations and AudioNote, I came into contact with tubes, great music and great people, and among them was John van der Sluis from the Audio and Technique magazine. Yeah. He was really leading in many ways. And I wouldn't call them rebel. They weren't they weren't rebellish because they wanted to be against something.
Mhm.
They wanted to go forward to something.
Yeah.
And I think
That's the difference.
yes, but still some bigger audio distributors in the Netherlands were not really happy with the magazine, as they were very critical, and I think still think they were right in doing what they were doing. But well, we know how that works.
We do.
Yes, and there I met Eelco and Peter.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that was mid 80s, 85, 86. And I recognize Eelco's hunger for reading the magazine just in one go. It was a wealth of information and inspiration to absorb, actually. So, and I still have all the magazines in our library. So
Yeah, I'm curious. We'll get on to that later.
Yeah.
There are some. Oh, okay, hiccup. There are some questions, but we'll get to those later. One question of a guy who is building a studio, and he says, with all TPR cabling throughout, all DB25s and wires, what would you say is the advantage of the TPR? Well, we'll get to cables later on, because we'll get to your products and why.
I'll leave that to you, Jaap.
And there's some guys from LA watching, so that's cool. Wow,
That's really late.
wow,
there.
that's quite impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you. There is one thing I would love to discuss, because both of you are teachers.
Mhm.
And you're teaching at the HKU in Utrecht,
Yes.
and you're in Eindhoven.
Yeah.
Let's start with Eelco. What's your drive by having practically two jobs? Because you have Grimm Audio,
Yes.
of course,
Yes.
and then you have your teaching job. And I've met some guys that came out of your classes. One is working at Triptech,
Mhm.
and they're everywhere. So you must be doing something right.
Yeah, or long. I'm teaching now for 20 years there.
Yeah.
So, and it's the largest European school for composers, etc.
Yeah.
Although I'm focusing more on the studio technology people.
Yeah.
But still, there's some 80 or 90 students every year. And in my classes, in the graduation year, I got some 6 to 9, sometimes a little more, but let's say 6 to 9 people that are graduating in truly studio technology or live audio technology. So, and that every year for 20 years, then there's quite a few people that have had classes from me. But to answer your question, what drives me there, it's well, maybe I need to explain what happened before I started teaching. I started teaching in 2000, so that's 20 years
it's 20
now.
years now. Yeah.
But in between the story I just told about meeting John van der Sluis.
Yeah.
And 2000, so that's roughly 13 years. I also discovered that writing was very important to me, and I started writing for audio and technique.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was 91, after I graduated on another studies, I switched to the conservatory, studying sonology and music, let's say recording technology at the conservatory in The Hague.
Mm-hmm.
And then at a certain moment, I met the editor of the Dutch professional audio magazine. And he's called Hans Beekhuizen.
Oh, yeah.
And Hans Beekhuizen and Pieter van Willenswaard also go back a long time.
Yeah.
And Hans and Pieter had started this professional audio magazine in 1989. I was one of the first subscribers.
Hans was
Yeah.
working. Wow.
Yeah, Hans
He's
and
been in the scene for a long time.
yeah, sure. So
Okay.
Hans and Pieter,
Yeah.
they founded Pro Audio magazine.
Yeah.
And around 91, so roughly 2 years after they started the magazine, but they go back longer. They wrote for HVT, HVT2, etc.
Yeah.
Anyway, Peter had told Hans that he wanted to stop writing. He also wrote for Stereophile, by the way, so maybe some people in the US might know his name.
Yeah.
Anyway, Hans was looking for a successor for technical editor at his magazine. And I met him, and I inspired him apparently because he invited me to come working for him, and that's 91. And I stayed at this magazine for 9 years.
Okay, that's
and this is where I also worked together with Peter a lot in the first 2-3 years, and we became good friends. And after Peter left, I became editor-in-chief also of the magazine, and I developed measurements. I tested many systems from digital.
Was it accepted back then? I mean, we discussed it earlier a little bit about being critical in this industry. And my view is, as long as a product is good, there's nothing to worry about. But if you start measuring and being critical, it's quite hard to survive.
That's right. And it was very hard, I can tell you.
Yeah.
It was very hard for John van der Sluis in Audio and Technique.
Yeah.
There was never enough money. Well, there was never even money to live from, actually.
I can recognize
and,
that.
And the same is true for Pro Audio magazine. Although the idea was that in the professional audio world, people were probably more rational. And,
probably.
So we're also more eager for rational reviews.
Yeah.
And it worked to a certain extent, but it was a tough market. I think one of the main problems is the Netherlands is a small market. And
it is.
Although the professional audio market was larger at that time, it was still small. Yeah. And if this would have been an English language magazine, it would have been much more successful.
Yeah, I guess.
Anyway, I enjoyed writing, and I enjoyed a lot researching and explaining and forwarding my knowledge. And so you learn a lot by explaining how things work. Yeah. And this is true for writing and reviewing and diving into all the AES journals and trying to translate that highly scientific stuff to the more casual reader. But
it's a pretty tough job sometimes.
This really inspired me. At the same time, I also wanted to become this professional audio recording engineer that I intended to become from the start. So in 97, I started my recording company, Fairytapes. So at the time, I had Fairytapes, and...
Does it still exist?
Yes, it still exists. I hardly ever do anything with it.
Yeah, it was one of the things I found out.
Like,
I didn't know that.
So in 97, I started Fairytapes. And then I ran that next to Pro Audio magazine for 3 years. So I already had experience in running 2 jobs at the time.
I can imagine.
So when I stopped working at the magazine, since I was after 9 years, I was just I'd seen it all. That was the major thing. It was sometimes tough to be a real good beta tester for the manufacturers, which meant that if I did a test and I sent it in as a preview, I got feedback and please just wait, we will do an improvement, and I got an improved version back and I could start all over.
I recognize that. It's tough to balance. In these days, if I can tell my view on that, of course I get products sometimes which are just they don't feel finished. As long as it's software, I think, you know what, I'll give you a month or two, fix it, and then we'll get back later. But back then, it was mostly hardware, I guess.
No. It was the introduction of digital audio mixing desks, DAWs, Pro Tools, all. And so it was a lot of software. And I developed measurement tools with the audio precision that we had to analyze what was going on inside these digital devices. And I learned a lot there, and I taught a lot there. well, to now finally come back to your
teaching,
question,
yes.
to teaching, when I quit the job with the magazine, I already knew the director of HKU Music and Technology, Rens Magielsen, because he was one of my authors.
Yeah.
And so it was a really short line to calling Rens and say, hi Rens, I'm quitting the job at the magazine, and I think that I would like to explore teaching, because it's in a way similar to being a reviewer. You have
in what
knowledge.
way?
Well, you have your knowledge, and you try to explain it to an audience.
Yeah.
And it's the difference is just that it's not written, but it's vocal. But in a way, it's similar. It's also a bit of performance.
Yeah.
I mean, writing is also performing. I don't know if you experience it like that, but that was my
Sometimes,
experience.
when it's from the heart, it is.
Yeah,
but,
and I see writing texts. It's similar to composing in a way. I'm trying to make sentences that are beautiful and that are a joy to read.
Mm-hmm.
And well, in the same way, you can do a performance live on stage or live in front of a class.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was a logical step. And I also wanted to have the freedom of developing my recording company without too much financial pressure.
Yeah.
So it would give me an income.
Okay.
And I did that for 1 day a week. And then for a couple of years, I went teaching 2 days a week. And then I went back to one day because it's too much next to Grimm Audio. But I would not want to stop that, even not after 20 years. Young people are so inspiring.
How do you see that, Guido? Because you teach as well. I mean, I see some similarities in.
Yeah.
It's an interesting view.
There's more than one side on teaching.
Yeah.
I started teaching in 2007 at the school where I actually graduated. So the teachers I had by then, which was when I graduated, or 91 or 2, I don't know, were still there. So that was a funny situation. But I think one of my drivers to teach is to share knowledge and to educate, because as a society you can grow from that. That's one. And I remember when I studied, once we had a guest lecture on that university by Jasper Goedbloed, who was by then employed at Philips Research, and he lectured about EMC, which was an inspiring lecture. And I still remember that, because it was like, wow, this is where knowledge is applied, and it's now going back to where it's being taught. And I missed that mix in the traditional way of how a university is set up. Yeah. So to me, it was important to bring back all that real life tough experience back into school.
But you still have to motivate your children, of course. Pupils.
I do have a view on that, and it might sound a bit harsh, but my experience is that there's roughly 80% is intrinsically motivated. Yeah. And there's 20% not motivated, and I don't know why they ever arrived at that university, but whatever you put into them, it will never work. So I decided to not put too much energy in them. Yeah. And then you have on the top, you have about 20% of great students, and you can actually challenge them by asking them some questions, and then they'll be off, and the next week they will get back to you with questions. And then you have this mid group of students where I experience to be most effective as a teacher, and it's really motivating and great to see how students can grow and develop themselves. That's one side, and the other side is that once in a while you meet some students that are really interesting. Like, okay, we might hire this guy because we have to expand our engineering team at Grimm Audio. And currently we have 3 ex-students, I should say 4, no, 3 ex-students in our wonderful team in Eindhoven. So that's one other side of being a teacher. You can kind of cherry pick
exactly
the best students. On the other hand, I must say that given our activity and maybe our reputation and I don't know what we radiate off, but we tend to work like a magnet to some people, and then they just meet us, they find us, and that works pretty well. But being a teacher is actually one part of that magnet, I guess. So.
Well, thank you very much for the bridge, because you said we're like a magnet, because I'm really wondering where Grimm Audio all started, because well, now it's a company with I think 8 people, roughly 8 people, and you use external sources as well, especially for the Mu1. It's been a large team. We'll get to that, because I'm really wondering how it all went. It was a
how it started.
Tough project.
When did it
You mean
start?
the Mu1 or Grimm Audio?
I know Grimm Audio, of course I know Grimm Audio, but I mainly know Grimm Audio from the clocks. And
it started a bit earlier.
So
I can elaborate a bit on that.
I'm curious.
Actually, when I started Fairytapes, I already had experience with recordings, of course. I didn't start out of the blue. Actually, when in the end of the 80s, I also was involved in the student classical orchestra, Krasna Musica of Delft, and I did all the recordings of the large concerts and the small concerts I did. And since I was inspired by John van der Sluis.
Well, one question is interesting. Are you inspired by your students?
Oh, yes. Well, that's what I said just a while back. That's one of the reasons that I'm still teaching after 20 years. I wouldn't want to miss that.
And you, Guido?
Do
you get any ideas from your students?
Definitely. You can only be a teacher if you understand what you're teaching. So it forced me to really understand what I was doing. And there were some moments that I got questions from students like that I didn't expect. Sometimes I wasn't prepared to answer that question. And I was always very straight, like, okay, guys, I can't answer it right now. I'll get back to that. And that was a moment, really good moments for me, like, okay, now we are going in a deeper level. My student just
they force you to dig deeper.
Exactly. And that's really inspiring. And it would never happen without trying to explain something to someone else. And like Eelco said, explaining can be written, oral, or teaching, or whatever. Even what we're doing now, it doesn't matter so much. So yes, it's a very inspiring environment.
Nice.
Yeah,
I thought it was a great question from Fred in the chat. Like, I recognize it with my network training, so I get questions. I think, oh, damn, that's a good question.
Okay,
I have to think about it.
Yes,
but I always get back to it, and
there's not much that teachers use so much as teaching.
Oh, it's tough, but it's fun. So
yeah, that's.
But go on.
Yes, okay. So end of the 80s, I was both. I wanted to proceed in doing these recordings. I was thinking about changing to the conservatory, and I was involved in the student orchestra.
Yeah.
And so I actually don't remember how, but somehow I was able to locate 3 shops or Philips branded shops, 2 microphones.
Oh, you brought
I
them.
brought one.
Oh, wow.
So I thought this is maybe the start of Grimm Audio.
That's a
Should
that's
show you that.
a Shoeps.
It's a Schups CM61, but it's a Philips branded one,
Okay.
and it's a early 60s mic, tube mic, and
You have to hold it up a bit.
shall
Yeah, that's it.
is I
Thanks.
don't see
It's
the
okay.
camera.
It's okay
It's
like that.
okay.
Yeah.
Ah, cool.
I can preview.
And it's a cool mic because you can switch it from omnidirectional to cardioid
Oh,
with
nice.
a mechanical switch.
Wow.
And this is by the original Dr. Schups, this design.
Yeah.
And this little plexiglass part, you can take it off, and now it becomes more omnidirectional.
Yeah.
If it's in omni position,
Oh, so yeah.
and you can make it more directional by putting it on. But if you have turned it to cardioid, this plexiglass part is really needed to make it function properly with the right polar pattern.
Yeah.
Anyway, I got 3 of these mics, and I also had access to Neumann KM83s, etc. But these were inspiring, and they convinced me that it was the right way to go.
Yeah.
Like I learned at Audio and Technique, to build truly transparent equipment based on tubes.
Yeah.
So actually what then happened is it took a while because I moved to this magazine instead of proceeding into recording
Choices.
technology directly.
Yeah.
But by 1997, when I started Fairytapes, I had collected more mics, etc.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to make a recording company, or to start a recording company that tried to approach, well, I would say transparency, but it's a more emotional transparency than technical transparency. This was what I brought from all my experience with Peter, and the listening sessions we did, and the hi-fi systems we tested, and the pro audio systems we tested.
So, but Grimm Audio didn't start out as a digital.
No.
Brand.
So what I'll explain. I'll come to that in a minute, because what
Enlighten
happened.
me.
So what happened is that I turned to my old friends Guido and Peter to help me build my recording equipment.
Yeah.
So this is what started around 96, 97, and we continue doing so. We built shunt-regulated power supplies for these tube mics.
Yeah.
We built a mixing desk, microphone preamplifiers, and in a certain moment also an analog to digital converter. And that was about 2002, I guess.
2 or 3?
Yeah, 2.
Yeah.
The
Anyway.
81.
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. All right.
No, but this was already the days of Super Audio CD. I had made an early Super Audio CD using these mics, by the way, using DCS converters that were the major converters at today's. And that's seen a re-release recently, by the way. It's now available on native DSD.
Okay.
It's a recording I made with the Combattimento Consort Amsterdam, and it's called Exceptional Masterpieces. You can download it in surround and stereo from native DSD. But that recording was made in 2000, I believe. So the early days of Super Audio CD. And so I had already the power supply, I had the microphone preamplifiers. And the next step for me was to improve my analog to digital conversion.
Yeah.
So that's where Guido and Peter and I started thinking about building an AD. And we bumped into some problems. And then there was this guy presenting a discrete analog to digital converter at Amsterdam AES in 2003.
Yeah.
And that was Bruno Putzijs.
Oh, wow.
And so Peter and I went to his presentation in Amsterdam, in the Rai. And he was a very inspiring guy, and he had the most inspiring schematic that he showed there.
Yeah.
And that he said, I tried to sell this and no one wanted it, so I'm giving it away for free now. Please
Please
Here
use
it
it.
is.
use it. So right after his talk, Peter and I walked after him and said, hey, Bruno, listen,
Yeah.
we're working on these equipment and people are forcing us to bring it to the market because the AD we already built that we were not completely satisfied with already sounded so much better than the commercially available
And
equipment.
this is what year?
This is 2003.
2003. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
For the perspective.
Yeah, so that's where Bruno and Peter and I, we sat in the aisles of the AES convention in Amsterdam. And then Bruno said, you of course you may use it, but I would love to join you. And then we got together with Guido and we decided to start the company together. So the official start of Grimm Audio was 2004, but we really started working on our first product, which was the AD that Bruno presented at the AES in May in 2003.
Yeah.
We started working on that in the autumn of 2003. And at the next AES in Berlin in 2004, again May, we introduced the prototype of the 81 and the company itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how it all started.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I wanted to know is to let our viewers also know that the road towards today has been a pretty long one, and
Yes.
that the knowledge you gathered is all in the products right now. It's not something that just happens and
Absolutely.
miraculously there's an MU1 or an LS1 BE or anything like that. But I didn't know about Bruno Koetsijs. That's an interesting one.
Yeah,
because
he's been everywhere.
he's been everywhere. And I mainly know Bruno from, of course, the Class D technology. And
Hypex.
now it's Eigentakt.
Eigentakt, Mola Mola.
Pure-
Mola
Purify.
Mola is...
Key.
But in the Mola Mola, interesting enough, now I can... Yeah, now I know, it is also a very special DA converter.
Right,
It's good that you mentioned that, and actually it tells us a bit about how the audio industry works.
Yeah, definitely.
Because at the very moment that you introduce or publish something clever, it's hardly adopted by the industry.
Most of the time, yes. Yeah.
And only a few people recognize some of the cleverness brought to the AES, for instance, which is a great bridge connecting people.
Yeah.
So, but to get back to your remark, it's never like, here's the product and there it is, and it's a long road. Yes,
it's a very long road.
It's a culmination of a lot of experience altogether.
You bring in some experience from Tentlabs.
Yeah, I do. Actually, that also started a bit earlier than say 2004, which was the formal start of the company. I happened to work at the AudioNote distributor in the Benelux. Yeah. And one day the AudioNote DAC 3 came in, and that sounded fabulous by those days. Yeah. And that was, I think it was 95, 94, 95. Mm-hmm. But it had a beefy price tag. So
AudioNote is not cheap.
It's not cheap, and really by that time it was one of the most impressive decks that I heard. Yeah. Although I was pretty close to the fire, so to speak, I didn't want to pay that much of money. So I went with a group of friends to develop our own converter. And that was also a pretty long road. We gathered every Thursday night, where we first shared a meal, and then we went to work to develop the converter. And we actually tackled a few of the very cornerstones of every converter, which is power supply, layouts, jitter, PLL techniques. And this deck came to the market as a DIY kit, and we gathered a group of interested people. So the first batch of kits, I think there were 30 kits. We sold those with a small bit of margin because it was all friend stuff, but we learned a lot, and I recall putting all the resistors in bags and writing the manuals with all the 4 of us. The deck is still on the internet. It's became famous as the Heiligers duck because Mark Heiligers is one of the guys that we worked with. So, but anyway. We learned a lot about D to A conversion.
Yeah. I remember your clock modifications. I did one with a Van Medevoort
The Van Medevoort, yes. Yeah.
And the TEAC transport, and it made a huge difference.
Yes.
It's bizarre.
Yes. In any piece of gear where you convert analog to digital or the other way around, the clock quality is
crucial.
Crucial. It's underestimated. You only recognize it when you hear it, and so on and so on. It's like preaching and preaching and preaching, and still. At Grimm Audio, we are at jitter levels that are really really low in our view.
Mm-hmm.
We're somewhere below 200 femtoseconds integrated from 10 hertz onwards, which is pretty low. And still, if we have small improvements on the circuits where jitter goes down a bit, and we do the listening tests, we're still surprised again and again.
Because that's an interesting one.
It's like it never ends.
But luckily, we're way past the point that people say jitter doesn't matter because 1 or 0, it's 1 or 0. But still, in the Redbook, I remember reading that 100 PS is the crucial barrier.
Well, let me correct you slightly. It's the Redbook says plus and minus 100 ppm. But
ppm. That's something different.
Exactly. That's only referring to the absolute frequency, which is important when you have to synchronize equipment to each other.
Yeah.
But that's it's a static
parts
parameter,
per mil.
parts per million, which only says something about the absolute accuracy. Like a regular clock that has to stay, of course, on time. And, you will not accept any deviation. Well, in normal life, it doesn't hurt, but so the Redbook standard doesn't say anything about jitter.
Okay. Okay.
And I don't think such a standard has to say anything about jitter or distortion or whatever, because that's up to the manufacturer to actually fill in. But in the early days, it was just like we need a clock and it needs to be this and that frequency, and then the whole system runs.
It works.
And it did. The disc turned, the data got through, and at a certain moment some conversion took place. Yeah. But the impact it has when you convert time to amplitude, in case of DA conversion, the impact it has is long time underestimated. And actually, it was Peter van Willensvaart who wrote in Stereophile for the very first time about that jitter. They heard differences between CD transports. And that was
1987.
87 or 89.
Already.
Yeah. Wow. We still have a scan of that article on our website because it was a very important marker in.
He was the early bird.
He was the early bird. And other people who contribute to Grimm Audio, like the late Henk ten Pierik and Herbert.
Yeah.
They were already working on solutions at the time. So Peter, as a journalist, he just concluded, wow, there must be something. And Herbert and Peter, or Herbert and Henk, they were already trying to improve the oscillators at the time. And they were cooperated with a recording engineer called Norbert Vale here in the Netherlands. And he made already very interesting recordings, and even if you play them now, those 80s recordings from Norbert are impressive.
Yeah.
But that's one of the forces, I think, with Grimm Audio. And there are some other examples of brands that have multiple disciplines that fuse together to get great products. But if you look at Grimm Audio, your specialty is digital and clocking.
And some analog stuff.
And some analog stuff, of course. Yeah, but you know more than that. But Peter mainly does power supplies, I thought.
Yeah, well,
tube technology.
He is also our component guru, so to say. He knows a lot about capacitors, resistors, etc., and what to choose and what not to.
If you fuse that all together, you get. I think it's tough to work like that because he knows that, and most people that have a vision can be stubborn.
Yes.
But in the end, you get a product that is quite well balanced and sounds better than others.
We are pretty stubborn, all of us. But
you have to be.
It doesn't mean we have constant conflicts because we are after the same.
Yeah, the goal is the same.
And there's seldomly a discussion on direction, like, hey, in terms of transparency and in terms of truth to the music.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall that we have had any real different observations in terms of where we want to go to.
No.
So we literally have the same goal. And of course, all the different types of engineering knowledge and experience, like you say, they fuse pretty well together.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important remark because making an audio product is a combination of a variety of competences. It's not only electronics. It's not only
no, but
analog,
you're at the recording side. It's also very important.
Mm-hmm.
What are you listening to?
Yes.
And well, we are in a studio right now, our tone, and well, you've seen the recording equipment, but it's something I think you have to know when you're either developing products or review products as well, because I can play a CD or a stream or whatever, but if I don't know how it's recorded, how do I know how it's supposed to sound?
Or even further back, because it all starts with acoustic sound.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's the true reference. And
acoustic sound.
Sure. So we all go regularly to live concerts of classical music and also jazz and pop, of course. But it's so important to... at the moment it's just terrible.
Yeah.
But actually, I in early June, when the orchestras were allowed to have some concerts with 25 people or so. I was lucky to visit a concert in Amsterdam, and well, you just go there and you just sit in the chair with a large distance, and it was a string orchestra because with the brass they don't want to have the risk with blowing. That's the whole problem also with singing. I'm singing in a choir. I've not sung since the outbreak.
You can't.
I miss that a lot. Yeah. Anyway, I was sitting there and they started playing and I got the shivers all over me.
Yeah.
It was, you cannot remember that sound. It's impossible. And it's such a direct communication. Yeah. So acoustic music, I never ever heard a recording that comes close.
No,
and really people say, oh, it sounds so real. They should go to real music more
That's
often.
one of my big frustrations about reviews. I sometimes I hardly read any reviews, to be honest. It sounds live. No, it doesn't. I like rock music mainly, and the dynamic and the wall of sound during a live concert is impossible to reproduce in your living room.
But I also teach my students that you really need to understand that there is different art forms.
Of course.
It's a different art form to have a live performance, completely different from making a recording of that. So you have to make a translation as a recording engineer from something that works in a studio or in a concert hall to something that works when listening to loudspeakers or maybe headphone.
True.
And that means that you need to modify stuff. You need to place your microphones. You need to know about how to transfer the diffuse field to loudspeakers in a way that works. And you need a lot of knowledge, but you need to listen carefully.
Yeah.
And you need to know that this is not the same. It's different. Yeah. But we try to... so if we talk about transparency, we don't mean the transparency that you are there. I mean, that's really impossible.
You can't.
But
not yet.
As many aspects as possible can, if you can transfer those, it's this new art form, listening to music on loudspeakers, is super special in itself.
Yeah.
And within that art form, you can also get the shivers. And
True.
That's what we're all after. We're trying to transfer parts of the original performance in such a way that you really get touched by that in a recorded format and the playback of that.
There's some questions dripping in, and I don't want to ignore my viewers.
You're in charge.
Our viewers. No, but it's an interesting story, and they really like it. That's a compliment. Peter Vets asks, to your experience, Jitter has a perfect correlation with sound quality, or are there any other factors at play which can be measured or cannot be measured?
Oh yeah,
definitely.
Well, that's easy.
Oh,
yes.
absolutely. Yeah. No,
the simple answer is yes. And when it comes down to measurements, there's some say well accepted measurements like frequency response and phase response and distortion and noise and those do play a role. And thanks, Peter, for asking, because I want to emphasize one thing is that most of measurements taking place in audio are in the frequency domain.
Yeah.
And while you can extract a lot of information from that, there's also information being lost by looking only in the frequency domain.
Yeah.
So I would like to really make a plea for looking in the time domain, which is a normal business in other industrial businesses, but in audio it's underestimated. So time domain behavior is very important, and we're not the only one, and we're not new in emphasizing this. But I would just take this opportunity. But and then you have the less obvious stuff like microphonics from passive components, or even microphonics from active components. I do recall one of the first big TDA 1540 converters, which was a DIP 40 package, which is it's centimeters, and if you really zoomed in on the output of it well enough by amplifying the signal with a measurement preamp, you could see that the output signal moved when you mechanically pushed the chip. Seriously. So when such a chip is mounted on a PCB and the PCB starts to vibrate because there's also a power supply transformer, or because it's put on a I don't know, whatever table. You have a transducer. And ceramic capacitors are transducers, even thick film resistors, which we avoid anyway, but are transducers. So you have to look with a very open mind to components and to everything you apply. So microphonics is one, and the other one is we're trying to develop some sane measurements for it. Is frequency-dependent behavior.
Yeah.
For instance, capacitance can vary depending on the voltage across a capacitor. Inductance can vary depending on the current through an inductor.
Mhm.
So, and the way datasheets are showing parameters is a very static way. It says 100 nanofarads plus and minus tolerances, blah, blah. And then if you're lucky, you have a temperature chart, and then you see the change of capacitance. So there's a lot more. And you have to be aware of it to take care of it.
Yeah, I remember you saying that the holy grail would be if you can measure the output of an amplifier and can show any differences in if you change a component that you can directly measure.
Of course, that would
be the holy grail, but that's impossible.
And I don't know if it's impossible, but for the moment we focus on sometimes on single components, and then we try to optimize until the level that we think is required at the moment.
Maybe I can also elaborate a bit on the tube side, because we talked a lot about that in the beginning.
Yeah.
And for some reasons, tubes do something good.
Yes.
Yes, they do something good.
Yeah, they do something good. And that's what started both me and Guido, that opened the gates of high-end audio.
Yeah.
But they also do something not so good. So they have certain distortion. They lack certain types of distortion, but they add certain other types of distortion.
Yeah, but it's a type of distortion that people like, I think.
No, not always.
All
if
right.
you, I got a long way, and so I did a lot of classical music recordings with tubes, and I have to say that's part of it is beautiful.
Yeah.
But part of it is also sitting in the way of the music.
Yeah.
And that means that when we started Grimm Audio, I already came to the conclusion that this company would not be about tubes. And with Bruno Putzijs, who, by the way, he also has a tube background, interestingly enough, he already also came to the conclusion that we should do without tubes. Okay. But all of us learned by using tubes that we will never do without the virtues of tubes. So let's say that there's two types of distortions, ugly and beautiful distortion. We want to get rid of the ugly distortion first. And then you have tubes. Well, some sort of schematics is not in general, but you can make beautifully sounding equipment with tubes.
Does that include clipping behavior?
Yeah, but it's not just that. We think it has to do with phase modulation stuff.
Okay.
And it's at all levels already.
Yeah.
Anyway, you still have your beautiful distortion, so to say. It's let's call it euphonic distortion. And if you're a musician or a music producer and you're making the music, that's all fine. It's great. Just use it to make your art. And of course, like guitar amplifiers, that's an obvious example, but you can also use it in mastering and in mixing and whatever.
Yeah.
But with Grimm Audio, we found out that the beautiful distortion can also get in the way of the music. If it's not intended, if you want to have an acoustical performance reproduced faithfully, you don't want beautiful distortion added.
No.
You certainly don't want ugly distortion added. So tubes are doing pretty good job there. But if you don't want the beautiful distortion as well, you just want no distortion, you have to know very well what you're doing, because before you know, is it possible
at all?
That's what we strive for.
It is.
Okay.
And if I may add to that, if you look at what's being published and even made in the last, I would say maybe even 10 years, you even see but it's still in the background and maybe in some tube scene that's not really obvious. But you see a development in tube amplifiers where also distortion is going down. So this friendly euphonic type of distortion is also being reduced to levels that we think and others think is I would say required.
Required.
Because in terms of sound, second and or say even harmonics are say nice. But they also are the reason for intermodulation distortion, which is, for instance, very audible when you have orchestras with multiples and multiples of instruments. And then it starts to sit in the way of enjoying the music, and you will not have that same effect when you have a single singer-songwriter recording, because it's pretty simple in terms of music. And then it's nice.
Could that be the main reason that most demos are with one drum or one guitar or one?
I think you hit the nail.
Yeah. I always think this is an easy song.
It's hard to play it back and make it sound bad.
Yeah.
That's the type of music.
Yeah.
And we try to avoid that music.
Yeah, I know.
Honestly, not from the musical part of it, and some of those types are really great, and we do play them. But we also play this really complex music, which is hard to reproduce. Having said that, is that we learned a lot. We got a lot of input and direction and questions in our head, like, hey, what's happening with those tube amps? And that's one side, and it pointed us in a certain direction.
Yeah.
And the other side, the other part is that tube engineering is changing in the direction of lowering distortions.
Yeah.
That's an interesting development, and I think if you apply this technology, you get the advantage of tubes not adding the nasty distortion, which transistors certainly have, but can be solved.
Crossover
Let me be
distortion and
clear.
stuff like that.
Yeah, well, we'll get back to that. But if you do so, you have the virtues of the tube sound in terms of not adding the nasty distortion, but also reducing the natural type of distortion in terms of linear distortion, and then it starts to become really interesting.
I think our first product, the 81, was all about that. There is a certain topology chosen most often for chip-based AD converters.
Yeah.
And because of that, the lowest distortion you can achieve is limited.
Yeah.
To the chip.
By
Exactly.
the chip, by the topology.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so therefore we decided to make a discrete analog to digital converter.
There was one guy that said it's not available anymore, and he's really sad about that.
Yeah, me too.
And he was asking something about another converter, the UH1, I don't know, let me see. The 81 is unfortunately discontinued. You are still famous in the studio world with that product. Is there any update about the UC1 audio interface?
Oh, yes. The UC1 is, let's call it, it's a Swiss Army knife for conversion. It's a combination of a monitor controller and an audio interface. It's designed to be the centerpiece of a studio.
Okay.
Just like the Mu1
Yeah.
media player is the centerpiece of a hi-fi playback system.
Yeah.
The UC1 is, let's say, has a similar function in a studio.
Yeah.
And but because of this, it was a bit more complex to design as initially expected.
Yeah.
That had not only to do with the hardware but also with the software. And for various reasons, the initial design had to be revisited.
Okay.
We're working on that now for over a year, and we're good on track now.
Okay.
And the intention is to release the UC1 early next year.
Okay.
And it's still, it's targeted at the professional audio market. There will be hi-fi people interested in buying it.
Does it stand for universal converter?
Yeah,
or?
right. Universal
okay,
converter.
well,
Yeah,
it's-
that's
Thank
right.
you.
It's also a USB
Good
converter,
guess.
but we call it a universal converter.
Yeah.
I have to say that it's intended from the start to be, let's say, a mid-price converter, where the
Yeah.
81 was a high-end converter.
That was
So-
another question. You just let me help. JM Tenap. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'm curious. Do they have a vision on how their knowledge encapsulated in the products can trickle down in the generic market for audio? That's an interesting
that's an
one.
interesting question.
We think about that.
Yeah, well, actually,
Yeah.
we have ideas to at least expose part of our knowledge through the AES.
Okay, that's good.
Next
That-
year, the AES will be in the Netherlands,
Yeah,
and
true.
we really hope that by that time we can have a live gathering again instead
Yeah.
of a virtual AES.
That would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we have some friends in the audio industry that also have real good insight in lots of stuff.
Mhm.
And we talked with them. Well, I can call the name. It's not sure yet that this presentation will be there.
One of the intentions.
But the intention is that together with Dave Hill of Crane Song,
Yeah.
who
Oh, yeah,
also
Crane
has
Song.
real
Yeah,
good
yeah.
ideas. He's a
Yeah.
professional audio
Yeah.
system engineer.
But it's good stuff.
It's real good stuff.
Yeah.
He's a great guy. And together with Dave, we had the idea to do presentations about what we are both working on. And that has to do with signal processing and jitter mainly.
I like this question from Huid de Vogelaar. I always forget to ask that one. It's about Rob Watts from Chord.
Okay, yes.
He has this philosophy about gates. His decks are completely different than
Mhm.
normal decks.
Mhm.
How do you look at that, his philosophy? It's mainly filtering technology.
Yeah, it's mainly filtering technology. Yeah, he is one of the people out there, just like us with the Mu One, who realized that digital processing has a huge impact on the sound quality of digital audio.
Yeah,
In
well,
f-
the Mu One is...
The Mu One is built
It's a
around
similar-
that
It's a
concept.
similar
A similar
concept.
story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's not the Mu One, just Grimm Audio and Chord. It's also DB technologies, MSB technologies, I should say. Sorry, MSB technologies. And not to forget MQA. Because MQA is also based on the same notion that
Yeah.
the processing that's going on inside DAC chips can be improved.
Yeah.
And
Actually, it's a similar story compared to jitter. It's underestimating the impact of something that you're doing, processing or whatever, amplifying or converting or calculating.
Yeah.
It's the same story all over again. We underestimate the impact of what we're doing,
Yeah.
and there one tends to cut corners too fast.
Mm-hmm.
And it tells us again and again that the human ear is such a sensitive instrument, which should be respected in that way. So
Especially to timing, I think.
it's time, it's zero crossing distortion, where jitter also low frequency jitter comes
okay.
in,
Okay.
which is, by the way, known in telecommunications but not in audio.
Why?
No, you can strip down a communication to 3 bits, and you can
Yeah.
still communicate.
True.
You can still hear it, understand it. You can narrow down the bandwidth, but as soon as you have zero crossing distortion, which can be caused by jitter, by
Mhm.
low frequency jitter mainly,
Mhm.
the understandability drops drastically.
Okay.
Having said that, when you listen to a song in a language that you don't practice a lot,
Yeah.
but you can follow, the harder it becomes to follow the song, probably the higher the jitter is, either in the recording or the playback.
That's a really, really, really interesting one, because you remember me reviewing the LS1BE.
Yes.
And the first thing I noticed was that the understandability of all the songs I played, was so much better
Mm.
than
Follow the
I was
lyrics.
used to. I was like, wow, this is what they're singing. And background choirs and instrument placement, it all just felt so natural.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's like, it's normal, but that's the whole strength of that product, I think. And it's the same with the Mu One. It's you plug it in, you think, okay, that's great. But once you go back, it's like, oh shit, it's really impressive.
Uh-huh.
Follow the lyrics.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what I now mostly review. It's like, okay, can I exactly hear what she's singing?
Mhm,
Yes.
mhm.
And that's it really differs.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, the LS1 was developed for professional audio
Yeah,
just
I
for
know.
this purpose. Because I was fed up with speakers that you were continuously trying to compensate for in your mind,
Yeah.
making a mix.
well,
And
it's
with the
tiring.
LS1, it's tiring. And if you have the LS1, you just hear, I have to lower the
Yeah.
threshold of my
Yeah.
compressor, because you can hear where the compressor starts working, and that makes
Which
the
is
work.
very confronting, by the way.
Yeah, well, there is a pretty there's great engineers out there that make wonderful recordings,
true.
and so you can enjoy a lot of music with the LS1s.
Yeah.
But if you're making or engineering that music, it can be it can take a lot of experience on your system,
Yeah.
and then still it takes a lot of time to make the right decisions.
Yeah.
And our intent with the LS1 was to have a loudspeaker where all your decisions would be easy to make. And of course that would be confronting. If you listen to the LS1, you think, oh my God, I had a lot to do.
Mhm.
It's really not good yet. But you know that once you achieved a good sound on the LS1s, it will sound good anywhere.
Probably on any speaker.
It was so good to hear the feedback from the people that are using the LS1 in studios, in mastering studios.
Yeah.
That was the exact feedback they gave me. They said, if it's hard to work on a mix on the LS1, but if it sounds good on the
It's
LS1,
good.
it sounds good anywhere.
Yeah.
And that was the exact intention.
Yeah,
But
getting back to the question.
to what?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I would say the generic remark I would like to make is be very critical on what you're doing, and don't assume something is good enough until you're really convinced about it. And I think that's part of a learning process.
And keep doubt, because it can also always become better.
Yeah.
And
True.
I think that doubt is the most important emotion to proceed
And
to
the
next
hardest
levels.
to live with.
And the hardest to live
Yeah.
with, maybe. You can be enthusiastic of anything that you achieved, but you need to stay
stay
doubtful
critical.
about if this is the real end of the story.
Yeah. One thing that helps getting back to acoustical recordings is that every time you have an occasion to listen to some acoustical instruments, just do it. Even if you see a piano, just touch one single tone and listen to it. Or if you have some musician playing in the streets, just stay there for 5 or 10 minutes and listen how it sounds.
Peter asks, and it's an interesting one because we were talking about jitter. Does analog audio therefore represent a more true and realistic sound, even though it has more distortion? There's no jitter with analog audio.
Depends on what you call analog audio. Because if you want to record it, you either have to go direct to disc.
Well, we can do that here.
Yeah, well, there's something with that I'll mention in another story, but that's one option. And the other option is use analog tape. And
I was impressed by good tape.
Yeah, but both have wow and flutter,
Absolutely.
which is the analog version of jitter. So time domain modulation, you will never get rid of that.
No, true.
I have an interesting experience with that in the Wisseloord studios 20 years back. We did a test of a new type of tape from BASF, I think it was.
Yeah.
And there was a live band playing in the studio, and we recorded it to tape. It was in my magazine days, so I was reviewing the tape, and the BASF had organized all this. So there was a live band playing. We listened to that in the control room, and we were listening off tape and direct to the output of the desk.
Yeah, yeah.
And we were doing that while they were playing live.
That's a very good comparison then.
So we
Yeah,
listened.
yeah.
We listened to direct to the desk or through the tape, and it was pretty close. It was pretty close. Just added a little distortion, but it was nice. It was good. Spaciousness, everything was good. So, well, everybody agreed. Wow, this is a great tape.
Yeah.
We rewinded the tape and we played it again. Now, of course, we were not able to compare with the live band, but to me at least, and to others in the room soon after, it was clear that it didn't sound as well as it had just sounded.
Just by winding
Just
it back.
by rewinding,
And
and then
playing it
people started
Wow.
to theorize about what happened, and
Stretch.
maybe the stretching or maybe the magnetic particles had already been demagnetized, blah blah blah.
Wow.
But it's much easier to explain what happened. The motors introduce wow and flutter.
Yeah, true.
And also all the resistance, the resistance on all the mechanical resistance that you have on the tape.
Yeah.
If you, that means that the speed of the tape on the head is not completely constant. That's the wow and flutter. However, if it's too slow at a certain moment, it's also too slow just a few centimeters further on the playback head. And so the modulation is going synchronously on the recording and the playback head, so you don't hear the modulation as long as it's low frequency enough. High frequency scrape, flutter you will hear, but the low frequency wow you will be eliminated because it's similar on the recording head as on the playback head, until you rewind the tape, and then of course you add
they're
the
not
playback
synchronized
wow.
anymore.
And you add it to the recording wow, and you have the double wow, so to say, and it's really sounding worse. So that's analog jitter, and I have to say that the level of digital sound that we now achieved with the 81 and with the low jitter that we have, etc., really makes digital sound better than analog.
True.
Yeah.
It took a long time, but what I would like to add is that also here you can learn from tape, you can learn from vinyl, you can learn from any format, and they all have their advantages and drawbacks.
True.
But, as long as you're open to them and take with you what you just learned, I think that's good. And if you love tape and you continue playing tape, I'm totally fine. There's no golden rules in this
It
world.
can be a tool.
It could be. It's helpful.
Yeah.
You can learn from it, and but at the end of the day, you have to collect all those experiences and blend them together and be a guard in making sure that nothing becomes forgotten or underestimated. And as long as you do that, you can make great products.
With Grimm Audio, our intention from the start was to well, we started in the professional audio world with the LS1. We also moved to the high-end hifi-world, but the intention was to have engineers build their piece of art, and they can use whatever they like.
Yeah.
Distortion all over the place. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Whatever floats your boat, just take it and make it. But once you are satisfied, you want to keep it as it is. You don't want it to change again, and certainly not in an unexpected manner. So the whole change from your final analog to digital converter and all kinds of tools that you use that you don't want to have introduced nasty types of distortion, all the way down to the playback side, you want to have that whole path transparent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And before that, you're free as an artist to do
True.
whatever you like.
I recall a remark from a mastering engineer. He said, "I want to hear it when it gets dirty,"
Yeah.
and
Right.
that was really spot on.
That's really spot on.
And that
True.
also means that
Yeah.
you can play any type of music, be it dubstep, be it classical, be it rock, on an LS1 system because it's just intended to let you hear what's on tape.
Yeah.
And not add anything, not leave anything away. And that's the whole intention of our product line. And that's also why it's so logical for us to be in the pro audio industry and the hi-fi industry at the same time, because we see this as a chain of products. And we don't deliver the euphonic part of that chain.
No.
There's great companies offering tools for that. But we try to offer you a transparent path once you are happy with the result and you want to preserve that all the way from the studio to the living room.
What's the one thing that you're most proud of as Grimm Audio?
Wow, that's an intriguing question.
Yeah.
For me, it's the teamwork.
Yeah, it's the guys together being able to generate great products.
Yeah, and it's also the feeling that we would never be able to do this alone.
No. By far.
And it's not, not just the people, our employees, etc., who are super important, but also the people gathering around us and contributing to
supporting it.
Well, also to let's say the Mu1,
Yeah.
and also the emotional feedback subwoofer, etc.
Yeah.
That's all external contributions of dear friends that are not employees of Grimm Audio, but do contribute to and have a very important role in our company, and that's our team, and I think that's very special and dear to me. Yeah.
We didn't get to all the questions, but who cares? I wanted to know one last thing, because it's almost lunchtime. Time flies.
Wow.
Yeah,
Really.
when you're having fun.
Yeah, we've been for 90 minutes already, and all the people are very loyal to us. There are some questions, but let's... there are two things. I wanted to know something about networking, of course, because the Mu1 is special in more segments of the product. You have the whole DSP thing, but there's also the fact that this is the first streamer I tested in which cables didn't matter. And it really made me think. That's one of those things that you think, damn, there is something, but what? And it intrigues me. So it is possible to make a streamer immune to networking.
Absolutely.
It's part of our philosophy to ensure that equipment is less sensitive for the environment that it's placed in. And the environment can be acoustical, it can be mechanical, it can be whatever, optical, electromagnetic.
But is that one of the cornerstones of Grimm Audio? Because when I reviewed the LS1BE, there's also a setting in which you can use more toe-in, so there's less reflection from the side walls.
Exactly.
The Mu1 is immune to Ethernet junk.
It's part of the philosophy, and if we are able to make equipment more immune to the environment, you have a more predictable result, regardless.
Absolutely true. Yeah.
And I will give you a very simple example where that's not the case. If you have a classical bipolar transistor designed power amplifier, the distortion of the input pair, which is usually a differential pair, which is, by the way, invented more than 100 years ago, but the differential pair input distortion depends on the source impedance. So depending on the output impedance of your preamplifier, this power amplifier will generate less or more distortion. Which is really a typical setting at reviewers or at clients at home, where they change the preamp and a lot of things change. Well, this is also a disadvantage of having more boxes looking at the classical setup of systems like preamp, cable, power amp, even the cable sound quality, it depends on the output impedance of the preamp.
Yeah.
So this is one of the reasons why we really tend to integrate as much as possible, just to avoid those errors based upon classical interfaces.
Yeah, yeah.
Making equipment more immune to the environment where it's being used gives you a more predictable result.
But it's really hard.
It's hard, yes, but no one told us it would be easy.
Is common mode noise measurable?
It is.
Yeah, so
Yes.
it is your approach in making the mu1 immune is measuring, testing, measuring,
Yes,
testing,
absolutely.
measuring,
Yeah.
testing, always.
Redeveloping and
Yeah,
so on.
exactly.
And so on.
Yeah,
It's a typical measurements which is pretty well known in the world of electromagnetic
Yeah, but with
compatibility.
Ethernet, it's relatively new. I'm really into that stuff, and I'm trying to
Yeah.
figure out what happens.
Well, it's pretty easy. It's in
Thanks.
in the IT world.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter
no,
as long as just your bits, your data stays data.
yeah, true.
The factual audible error that's made
Yeah,
is not in the data
no,
processing.
absolutely not.
It's in the analog domain.
True.
And the analog domain starts in the DA converter.
Ah,
So
yeah.
when common mode noise enters the DA converter,
Yeah,
which is logical because it's connected in a galvanic way.
yeah, exactly. It's electrically
to
connected.
the digital source, being a CD transporter or a streamer or whatever. As at the moment the common mode noise ripples through your DA converter, depending on the design of the converter, it will give an audible difference.
Yeah, true.
And the same may even happen in the power amplifier, which is, after all, also an analog design.
Well, the most striking example I had recently was with a streamer of brand X. I don't. It's not important
Never mind.
to mention. And I measured the power supply. It was horrible.
Mhm.
And as soon as I plugged in the single-ended connections to the pass labs, the whole noise dropped
Mhm.
by half.
Okay.
So I thought, okay, wow, that noise is now going into my preamp then.
Probably. Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
I swapped out the power supply.
Thank you.
Your sound quality got
Drastically better.
Yeah.
It was
it's
mind-blowingly
So
better.
this is actually pretty easily measurable.
It
Yes.
was for me because
Yeah.
it was an easy.
Yeah.
Like,
But
okay,
you
noisy.
wonder why the manufacturers don't do
Well,
it.
they took it very seriously, and you can reproduce the tests, so
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
did, and I said, oh
Yeah.
shit, yeah, you're right. So they're
Yeah.
gonna fix it.
Yeah.
So I'm a better tester in that way.
Yeah. But
yes.
we have the advantage that we started with the 81. Because the 81 can be called the most sensitive
Yeah,
design ever imaginable. And that's, well, I mentioned that already. We wanted to build an AD converter with lower distortion.
yeah,
But the tricks they used in the chips to that caused the higher distortion, they were not for nothing. They were intended to become less sensitive to external interference.
yeah. Yeah.
So the design with a switch cap filter, for people who know what it is, makes the system less sensitive to high frequency jitter on the clock.
Yeah, yeah.
But at the same time, it is a
Introduces-
very difficult
yeah.
load for the source.
Yeah.
And that's where the distortion comes from. So
yeah.
if you want to have lower distortion, you cannot use the switch cap filter. But if you don't use a switch cap filter, the system becomes super sensitive to jitter. So in a way, it's a jitter analyzer. So then we had to build super good power supplies
Yeah.
and very well-designed crystal oscillator circuitry to make the 81 work at all with reasonably low
So it became very
noise.
expensive.
Of course,
Yeah.
but also it taught us a lot.
Yeah,
And but that's really the core of our company. The first product that we built was based upon making something that's sensitive,
yeah,
surrounding by all kinds of smart electronics to make it
Immune.
Yeah.
And that's the story that started at the 81 and it continues all the way to where we now. We always measure first.
Yeah.
It has to measure well.
Mm-hmm.
And then we start listening and we start swapping components and try to understand why this component sounds better than another component. But we first need to make sure that all the measurements are good. Yeah.
Well, there are... can you try to explain in 5 minutes what the MU1 makes very special? Why is it different than other streamers? We've written a complete article about the MU1, by the way.
Yeah.
Check alphaaudio.nl or .net if you want to read it in English. We had an interview with Eelco Grimm about the MU1. But for our viewers, what's so special about the MU1?
Yeah, well, I think it starts with what I just said, the approach of the electronics. So the power supply, for instance, which is a switch mode because it's a relatively small box. You have a computer that draws a lot of current, etc.
So a lot of our viewers are now like, switch mode, it's crap.
So but you cannot build it like that without a switch mode. So we tried an off-the-shelf switch mode, and it measured horrible. And so how do we measure that?
Yeah.
We have our clock circuitry also in the MU1, and we just analyzed the phase noise, the jitter of that clock circuitry.
Yeah.
And you can see what's happening in the power supply. So we decided to build the power supplies from the ground up, focusing
switch mode.
The switch mode,
design.
Everything in the MU1 is on design, except of the NUC.
We already told that we are proud of our team. They can do a lot, which we can't do, but which we indicate is important.
Yeah.
And then they take it and they take it to levels that are really impressive. There's with switch modes you have legal radiation limits, and the legal radiation limits are not sufficient for audio application.
No.
So we have to be way beyond that, and that's what the guys do.
So that's
they are special.
That's where it starts, and then of course, well, our knowledge of jitter and the impact of it is of course a major part of the design of the MU1. That's why we choose an AES3 output to the next stage of the DAC, because then you can convey the clock to the next stage.
It's an important one.
If you do it through USB or Ethernet, you're not able to connect your and to send your clock to the downstream device.
Yeah, because it's asynchronous.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's since we know jitter is so important, we had to choose this connection type.
And I would like to emphasize that async is not bad as such, as long as you have a very high quality clock in the converter.
Exactly.
But our experience is that the majority of converters benefits from a low jitter stream where the clock is regenerated based upon the AES signal.
Yeah, well, in this case.
In any case where you have a source with a low jitter AES output.
Yeah.
And that's the majority of commercially available DACs.
So they're sensitive to the incoming jitter.
Yeah, we had well, that's another interview by itself, but I had an interesting talk with Triptech about high frequency, and it's the same philosophy as this is, because it's really high sampling rate.
Yeah.
The recalculation in the DAC is less complex.
Yeah, well, right. And then there you touch upon the third topic, which is the recalculations.
Exactly.
And so in our FPGA, we use extreme high performance upsampling and also downsampling of the original source material. And we experienced that it has huge impact on the sound quality, even larger than we expected. So this is in a way like our jitter adventure, that once you start discovering that it matters, the end is still not in sight.
Oh no! But that's a good bridge to my next question. What's next in the pipeline for Grimm Audio?
Yeah, well,
can you reveal a little bit?
Yeah, I told you already about the UC one that will finally be released early next year.
That's an interesting one.
And it's no secret that we are working on a digital to analog converter for the MU1.
Yeah, so there will be an integrated one.
An
with
integrated
this.
one, we call it the Mu 2, and that's also due for mid next year.
Okay, cool.
And so this
That will be a very special DA converter.
that
Yeah, you
will
told
be
me. It's
something.
not off the shelf.
No.
It's not going to be off the shelf. No.
Is your design?
No. I'm not really a converter guy. Actually, I'm more into analog. I know how they work and I know how to treat them. But this is a special contribution from two of the external guys. And we. It's all fine to us. We don't have to invent everything ourselves.
No. As long as it integrates well and it's good.
Exactly.
Good enough, or
Well, it has
better.
to fit with the company's philosophy.
Yes.
And that's what the company is about. It's, let's say, a network company, and we make sure that all the products that we release are built along that philosophy.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of knowledge inside the company, but we don't believe that amount of knowledge is enough to reach the levels that we intend to reach. So we want to be larger than we actually are.
You set the bar very high.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
therefore we look to contributions from outside our company. And I
Peter
think
wants to
that's-
know what kind of DAC, NOS or upsampling.
No, it's upsampling. We are experimenting at the moment with the topology, but it will at the moment, and it can all change. But at the moment, it's let's say a variant of the DAC that's inside the 81, because you build an AD with a DA in the loop.
Yeah.
But it's a smarter, updated version of that.
Yeah.
That gives more dynamic range, and especially also in the calculations. And it's connected directly to our FPGA board.
I thought it would be from one of the other Dutch guys, but I guessed wrong.
Yeah, that
No,
could
no,
be.
no, no,
He's
no,
also
no,
making great decks.
I think they're very good.
Yes.
Yeah, I like their
yes.
sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
No,
To-
it's
to-
no oversampling DAC. It's no
to add to
multi-bit
that,
DAC. Not,
yeah.
it will be a low-bit DAC running at a high frequency.
Okay.
We do understand the virtues of non-oversampling decks, because you don't have the digital filter and you don't have the probable errors introduced in the filtering. But non-oversampling has one big disadvantage. That's the relative amount of high frequency noise, which may or may not affect your amplifier. And non-oversampling is not a target for us, but we do realize, and we did experience non-oversampled decks.
Yeah,
because
we built
Peter
them
van Lenswaard
ourselves.
built them,
Yeah.
and I built a CD player with a non-oversampling deck. But once you hear that and you say, okay, there's definitely something special going on here.
Yeah.
That is input for us to
Right.
say, okay, what's getting in the way?
Exactly.
Okay, let's
Well,
solve that.
In that sense, non-oversampling DACs were to us like tubes. They teach us a lot, but they introduce types of distortion that we don't want in our end products. But our end products should not sound worse than a tube amp or a non-oversampling DAC.
No.
So that's a
But there
starting
are
point for us.
oh man, there are so few decks that I like after hearing, well, the Sonnet or Metrum. I can mention the name. They all know I use them a lot. What you say, there is something special in that deck that I really like. It's my
Absolutely.
personal
You
preference.
And we
you
know
wait
that.
for the MU2.
I will, but I'm very curious then. But I do like some other off-the-shelf deck
Yes.
chips. I mean, a good Sabre sounds good. A good AKM sounds better, I think. I like their sound better, but that's preference. But I'm curious what you will bring us.
It will be a discrete design of our own.
Okay, that's good to know.
So there will be no standard chip inside. Well, there are standard chips, but not the standard DAC chips.
Yeah.
And it's because it's fun to do, but it's also because we believe that we can be more in control on the design. and we know the problems that you introduce by using this topology, because again, like the 81, it becomes much more sensitive to all kinds of external interference. But we know about that, we have experience to control that, and then it offers us a freedom. And this the freedom is, I think, you asked for the core quality of Grimm audio. I think that we want to have the freedom to get into control. And that's with everything we do, because the final part of the MU1, to wrap that up, I think you're way over the 5 minutes that you gave us. But the final part is the software side, and that has to do with user interfacing, of course. Well, we selected Rune for the actual Rune user experience, but apart from Rune, there's running a lot of software in the MU1.
I know.
We have an operating system, we have a control system, we have VICs, etc., and the FPGA, of course. Now, all that software, part of Rune, we develop in-house, and we almost never use libraries for that. We build it from the ground up.
How many nightmares did you have?
Well, we avoided many nightmares because of this strategy, yes. But it's a lot of work.
Hard.
And we adopted the kind of 50s, 60s style of programming, very much straightforward, building upon the hardware that you have, not making it useful for all CPUs ever on this planet.
For this.
Very specific, and that makes it, to our opinion, much more stable, so we get more in control. And that's definitely something that sets the MU1 apart. I'm certain that not many people went down there.
No. There is one other thing I would like to add, is that the MU1 has 3 digital outputs, which makes it very, very interesting for multi-channel playback.
Oh, there was one question I forgot. Will there be multi-channel?
Yes.
There will be.
It's a planned update for later this year.
I know. You told me in the interview about the multi-channel setup. So
but in terms of hardware, it's all prepared.
That makes it really special. I hardly know any streamers that can do multi-channel.
Yeah. Well, this will be multi-channel DXD.
Wow. All right.
So
let's not go to DSD discussions now. But
but this DXD
DXD is something different. I know.
PCM.
So the Mu2. I remember you telling me about the Mu3.
Yeah,
with amps.
It's in the architecture. We're not it's not planned yet. What we see in the audio world is that amplifiers are very personal choices.
Yeah, they are.
I think if we plan a Mu3, it will be for a specific group of customers which like to have a very elegant, small compact setup where you only have to connect a pair of speakers.
Yeah.
But it's not yet planned.
But you believe in active speakers.
Absolutely.
Well, we see that active speakers have a lot of advantages.
Big advantages.
Because you have all your interfacing and all the possible errors that are induced there. Yeah. You have them in control. Yeah. But we also realize that the world consists of people having a pair of passive speakers, which they want to keep for good reasons. Yeah. So you have to match your market as well. Yeah. But yes, we do like active. We do like integrated solutions. Let's keep it that way. Yeah. And active is one example of that.
About integration, then we're gonna round it off.
Yeah.
An hour late. I don't care. One thing I didn't think about what Frans does. Processing of video. I mean, this is going to be the central hub.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there going to be some routing option of video so you can grab your Blu-ray player, pass through the video, and use...
We had a lot of discussions.
Yeah,
about
I can imagine.
Yeah. Well, the truth is that the development in the video world is still going fast.
Really fast. Yeah.
Much faster than in audio. I mean, if you can support DXD 32 bits, I don't think there will be anything wider than that.
No.
So, but with video, the end is not in sight.
No.
That means that whenever you introduce a video player at this moment, it will be obsolete in a couple of years.
Yeah, true.
We intended to build equipment that you can use for many, many years.
Yeah.
the integration with video is therefore done in another way. We advise to have a real good HDMI video renderer with all the AC4 and AAC MPEG codecs inside that you have to pay licenses for that we also didn't enjoy to do.
Oh, licensing.
So if you have such a player, just connect it through its digital output to the Mu1, and the Mu1 will de-jitter that audio, will upsample it, and offer a real nice source for your DAC.
What Illusonic does, I upgraded the board.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a modular design.
That's an option.
And it was really...
Right. And Oppo, of course, offers all kinds of...
It's also modular.
Oppo is a big company.
It's really big.
And you have to be big to be able to communicate with these certifying companies like Dolby, etc. And we didn't think that was our expertise.
Well, that's a good point you have there, because I had an issue with decoding. Dolby doesn't work, DTS does, so you can't use it as a central hub in that sense. You have to know what you're doing.
It's a nightmare. You need a huge team too.
And
so we didn't go there.
And I don't care about all the codecs. I mean, I use it for measurements. It's ideal for that.
Now we decided to separate that functionality and make the MU1 a real audio device.
Good. Let's just say we talked for 2 hours now.
Wow.
It's enough. Thank you for your time. And I'm going to thank my viewers for staying for 2 hours. I guess a lot of them did. I saw. This interview is going to be available offline after we process it. So no worries if you missed any stuff. It's going to be online. Thank you.
And thank you for having us.
Wonderful, Jaap. Thanks for inviting us.
I enjoyed myself a lot. Let's have lunch.
We had a great interview.
And the guy in LA, wow, respect.
Kudos. Okay.
We're going to go offline now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.